Hello. We're all very happy to be here. First, let me introduce my boys. This is Federico. This is Charlie. This is Hayao. This is Stanley. This is Andre. Sergio. And this is Alejandro. Also, the boys wanted me to wish you peace and happiness. These guys aren't just a bunch of goofballs. They know there's plenty of suffering in the world. But they tell me there's this all-pervading happiness, and the more time I spend with them, the more I believe it. The more I believe that a director who made disturbing and strange films also reflected the beauty and wonderment of our world, the magic of it. That he wasn't such a strange and disturbing guy after all. That he made friends and inspired those around him, and inspired those he never met, all through his art. That an artist is so wonderful, so strange, yet so sincere, that he could reach people all over the globe and inspire them to make their own art, or to see the world in their own unique way. That this artist really wasn't a madman, that he was a beautiful soul inside and out, and all those who knew him, whether in person or through his art, all mourned the loss of this great man. And he'll be sorely missed. So me and the boys wanted to wish you peace and happiness, and long live the films of David Lynch. Thanks a million.
Hello everyone, welcome to Kinotherapy, and I'm very excited about this video's director. Originally I didn't want to cover this director until later in my series, given that this is supposed to serve as an introduction to films and the artists who make them. I figured this filmmaker's work was obviously too bizarre and inaccessible for a beginner to resonate with, and you'll just be lost in the foggy bog of his mind. But then I remembered I was thrown into the freezing cold waters of these movies, coming out in a shivering, disoriented disarray. So you should too. That's an important part in a filmgoer's development, being confused and frustrated. Get used to it. Besides, due to the director's recent passing, I feel that there's many who are looking to get into the work of this filmmaker, but might be hesitant to do so. His spontaneous imagination has repelled and attracted many over the years, yet no one can deny they were made with the heart and the mind of a completely passionate and singular individual. I can of course only be talking about the one-of-a-kind filmmaker and artist, David Lynch. Often described as a surrealistic, dreamlike, or perhaps nightmare-like is more appropriate, to describe Lynch films as weird is a great reduction of his work. Despite how off-putting Lynch's films appear, I personally don't think they're all that confusing. David Lynch's films operate on the purest stream of consciousness. What you see and what you feel is what you get. If a Lynch scene makes you laugh, it was supposed to make you laugh. If a scene perplexes you, it was probably supposed to perplex you. I feel like that aspect of confusion is something we bring, demanding some kind of reasoning behind all the madness, when really, the madness itself was the point, and displayed a clearer picture of the human psyche than exposition ever could. Lynch hated explaining his films, mainly because there wasn't much to explain. He didn't want you to understand his work, he wanted you to experience it. That's not to say Lynch's films didn't contain thematic depth, yet his expressions were often hidden in plain sight. Despite their off-putting nature, one can get wrapped up in the imagination, atmosphere, and if you look closely, heart and humor. I do think Lynch's films have an entertainment value to them. I mean, they're certainly not boring, you can't deny that. I also don't want to undersell some of the more Brechtian qualities of his work, because it can still be daunting and opaque to any beginner. His films can be sinisterly dark and violent, some even accusing him of being a sadist. The acting in his films is often stilted, carrying awkward line deliveries and exaggerated facial expressions, purposefully so. And of course there's moments that feel like an obsolete waste of time, and Lynch is simply being weird for the sake of being weird. Which is kinda true? Lynch wasn't making things up randomly just to incite a reaction, he was being sincere, not provocative. In a sense, he was being weird for the sake of being weird, but that's because he was a weird guy. I also don't want to imply that Lynch's films have no layers, for there's certainly intent, vision, and conviction behind many of his films. From diving into the seedy underbelly of American suburbia, from dissecting the inner complexes of Jungian psychology, David Lynch made observations on humanity, the subconscious, and life more keen than practical analysts. They weren't just nonsense. Lynch got us to look at the world in a more enlightening way, whether they were dark truths or rare beauties. This would be my advice for starting down your David Lynch journey. Don't be so caught up with understanding the work. Instead, let the film hypnotize you and put you under its spell. Invest yourself in the work, but don't try straining yourself to find some metaphor. Think of it like meditating. As Lynch himself meditated to make his films, we can coalesce and transcend with him on his pure thoughts. Lynch was highly invested in transcendental meditation, which he did twice a day for decades, up until the end of his life. This is how Lynch got his ideas. He would retreat to the inner recesses of his mind, places where no man freely ventured, and discovered inner parts of himself. Thoughts that amazed, bemused, discomforted, or provoked him were an unrealized truth Lynch knew he had to communicate to the material world. This is why Lynch films feel so dreamlike, because they are conjured by the stuff dreams are made of. Additionally, everything you're seeing is earnestly genuine, since it came from the deepest roots of truth. Lynch was a highly spiritual person. His works were at the crossroads of Jungian psychology and Eastern philosophy. He wrote about his meditation process in his book, Catching the Big Fish, which I highly recommend to anyone who's an artist or interested in meditation at all. David Lynch is known for his oppressive, oniric atmosphere, one that can put you in a trance one moment and then snap you awake the next. They'll absorb you, then make you scream, then be funny, then emotional, before plunging back into paralyzing nightmare stupor, as if David Lynch was constantly trying to break his own flow. His vision is what gave birth to the term Lynchian. We've had Shakespearean, Kafkaesque, Fellini-esque, Brechtian, and now Lynchian has entered the canon to describe things that are otherwise indescribable. Lynchian does not simply mean surreal, but rather it's that perfect encapsulation of the uncanny. Aesthetics that are not completely out there, just off. There's a paradoxical nature to Lynch's films, as they ride the fine ravine of the uncanny valley. On one side you have the absurd, the strange, the terrible, and on the other side is our mundane world of beauty, love, and imagination. Settings that appear real, yet are presented in a skewed vision of a warped, half-realized memory. It's a recipe of familiarity baked with unnatural ingredients. This is what creates that horror undertone in his films, a disturbing vibe that you can't quite place your finger on, but chills every bone in your body. Lynch's films were conjured through his perfect marriage of image and sound, the two cornerstones that make up a film. Distinct colors and lights are tantalizing yet overbearing in a distracting presence that morphs our world into an unsettling one. These images are compelling and beautiful, yet the stark colors stand out a little too much, peculiarly drawing attention to themselves, as if the colors were desperate to convince you that this world is real. Pitch black darkness seems to be tearing a void in the celluloid. Lynch was also a master of sound. We often don't linger on the importance of sound in film. Even those of us film fanatics often center our attention on the visuals. Yet Lynch knew that sound was just as important. Lynch's innovative soundscapes were almost other worlds in themselves, working in tandem with musicians like Angelo Badalamenti and Julie Cruz, along with sound designers like Alan Splett. Lynch has sometimes been credited as the sound designer for his films, given how much work he puts into it. There's a constant sonic noise permeating throughout, and it's more than just a droning hum. Lynch admires the sound wind makes and heightens the sound to a puffing intensity. This helps to establish subconscious emotions we can't see on the surface. Lynch will also increase the volume of small diegetic sounds, often during silent scenes, grounding this tangible fantasy world while still getting across the unfamiliar nature lurking beneath. Lynch has gone through some crazy experimentations to make sound. He's so adept at it that he's even released his own music. The films of David Lynch are like mystery stories, yet they make you the detective. Perhaps it's not about the answers, but it's about the mystery. We often go through life desperate for answers, yet we never find any. That search is confusing and tormenting, but in a strange way it's often beautiful and wondrous. David Keith Lynch was born on January 20th, 1946. He was born in Missoula, Montana, but his family moved around frequently due to his father's agricultural government job. Lynch lived his entire childhood in various American suburbs, which evidently would go on to play a role in his work. In fact, you'll come to realize that no matter where Lynch lived during his life, the environment would form an interpretation and affect his films. Lynch stated that he had a plainly average childhood. However, one night, him and his brother saw a naked woman with a bloodied mouth, dazedly shuffling toward them. His brother began to cry, and young David wanted to help, but didn't know how. He just stood there stunned. Despite Lynch's insistence on his mundane upbringing, some have attributed this incident to being the first crack in American domesticity Lynch noticed. Even if he never dwelt on it, it's safe to say that this moment was shoved deep into his subconscious and would appear in a film of his years later. Other than that, Lynch had a lot of friends, a loving family, and plenty of ambition. He became interested in painting at a young age and dedicated himself to being a great artist. He saw the world as a fantastic, wondrous place, and his boundless creativity was inspired by those around him. Lynch's favorite painters were the appropriate Francis Bacon, and surprisingly the soft melancholy of Edward Hopper, again highlighting the juxtaposition in Lynch. By his teen years, Lynch began to loathe school, finding it a dull place that squanders creativity and expression, going so far as to call the institution a crime against the youth. Lynch was serious about pursuing painting, and attended a few colleges that he believed failed to encourage any kind of artistry. However, he moved to Philadelphia, where he was greatly enraptured by the city, a brash mix of the beautiful and ugly parts of America. One day, Lynch had an idea to animate a film based on one of his paintings, 6 Men Getting Sick, 6 times. Lynch purchased a cheap Bolex camera and made the experimental film for next to nothing.
I was in this cubicle one night painting a garden at night, mostly black with some leaves green coming out. And I was sitting looking at this painting, and from the painting I heard a wind, and then I saw the green start to move. And I said, "Oh, a moving painting."
Upon producing this short, Lynch made a discovery that he had an untapped interest and passion for filmmaking. He realized the potential as a great visual medium for portraying the bizarre and the nightmarish, the things we couldn't normally see or experience. Lynch refocused his attention toward making experimental short films and began honing his skills at the American Film Institute Conservatory, where he studied cinema and developed his own unique stylizations. Despite his alleged late interest, Lynch already had plenty of expressionist films inspiring him. He was a great admirer of Federico Fellini, as well as Ingmar Bergman, Werner Herzog, Alfred Hitchcock, Jacques Tati, Stanley Kubrick, and Billy Wilder. The Wizard of Oz was one of his favorite movies of all time, and there's a fascinating connection to explore between that film and Lynch's work. His other favorites included Sunset Boulevard, 8½, Persona, Rear Window, Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, and Strotzek. One film that's been cited as a precursor to Lynch's style is Maya Deren's masterpiece, Meshes of the Afternoon, an unsettling, psychological, dreamlike film examining the human mind, duality, feminism, and mental anguish. As Lynch traversed his filmmaking journey, he acquired many collaborators that would become lifelong friends of his, members of his Lynch mob. People loved working with him, and you can see that camaraderie in front of and behind the screen. I've already mentioned Angelo Badalamenti and Alan Splett. There was editor Mary Sweeney, who would soon become his wife. Frederick Elm's masterful cinematography is what helped give Lynch films that distinct, alluring glow, along with DPs Freddie Francis and Peter Deming. Lynch frequently casted the boyish Kyle MacLachlan, who was always a joy to see. His white-collar worker presentation provided warmth and obliqueness alike. MacLachlan was not only a frequent collaborator, but would become one of Lynch's very close friends. Other favorite actors to work with included Laura Dern, Naomi Watts, Jack Nance, Harry Dean Stanton, and half of Twin Peaks were just full of players that wanted nothing more than to be in a David Lynch project. After finding success with some of his shorts, Lynch struggled to put all his might into an ambitious, maddening dream project, one of which the audiences of Hollywood could not even fathom. In 1977, a complete oddity emerged from the strange waters of weird wonder and imagination. A classic forerunner of the midnight movie, Eraserhead caught cult attention with its dreamily disturbing atmosphere. Haunting images, uncomfortable humor, and unfettered dream sequences made this an inherently unforgettable film for those who were amused and appalled by it. Plots don't hold much significance in a Lynch film and can't be acutely described anyway, but let's see what we got here. Henry is living in a barren, industrial wasteland, inspired by Lynch's own residents of Philadelphia. Already evoking feelings of desolation and listlessness, Henry soon becomes a father to a grotesque worm baby thing, and his new responsibilities burst at his seams more and more. The film doesn't have the same duality his later works had, and is a pure stream of nightmare inducement. Yet we can still find themes that Lynch would develop over the years, such as the dark side of American life, sexuality, madness, evil, and of course his outlandish, disquieting surrealism. With a budget of only $100,000 and a production period lasting 5 years, it took strong dedication from everyone on board to complete this project. Actor Jack Nance was so dedicated that he didn't mind keeping his character's hairstyle for the entire 5 years the film took to make. Production constantly had to halt as Lynch ran out of money, borrowing from friends Jack Fisk and Sissy Spacek, as well as from Nance and his wife Catherine E. Coulson. Lynch himself even took a paper delivery job. Despite the dreamlike nature of the film, it still diverts from the main story into explicit dream sequences, as Henry tries to escape reality. The film opens on an allegorical prologue, and consistently delivers more subconscious sequences representing Henry's fears, insecurities, and desires. The purpose our own dreams serve are portrayed in an accurate structure by the dream master David Lynch. The film was known for its mind-boggling sound design, which was so unique and innovative for the time. As I mentioned earlier, Eraserhead employs a soundscape based on harsh winds, crafting a desolate landscape, one that exists in a cosmic void. Lynch continued to experiment with sound, combining mundane noises into strange effects. Speaking of effects, Eraserhead employed some oniric editing transitions and double exposures. In regards to the more noticeable effects, the practical props, sets, and creature designs are out of this world, fleshing out organic components through prosthetics and stop motion. Creative sets and makeup go above and beyond, as the goo and innards of sentient beings reveal the gross slime slushing under this decaying city. Again, Lynch was experimenting, mixing and matching to create such oddities like the fish baby itself. Lynch refused to disclose what exactly he made that with, which is concerning, now that I think about it. As with any alternate reality film, audiences have tried interpreting what the film's deeper meanings may be. Lynch has declined to explaining what the film means, as he has for all his films. Yet he expressed that unlike his films such as Mulholland Drive, in which he supplied clues for viewers to investigate themselves, Eraserhead doesn't have a predisposed meaning. That doesn't mean, however, that one can't derive an interpretation from it, which Lynch himself has. Lynch stated that nobody has been able to guess his interpretation of the film, yet many viewers seem to draw similar conclusions. To us, Eraserhead represents a morbid fading into obscurity and waste. Your life being eaten away by familial responsibilities, showing the infant not as a cute bundle of joy, but a monster. Societal, familial, and internal factors all play into the theme of decay, and the way it all rubs out. It's all in the title, and one key scene involving that title, the scene in which Lynch first dreamed of and envisioned the film. It's the perfect 70s independent movie that combines artistic vision and uncouth, unrestrained abominations. A piece that exists on a higher plane, yet something that embodies a sordid guerrilla sentiment, reflecting the dark Jungian aspects of humanity. In one sense, it's just a bizarre, low-budget horror film. Yet it's made with clear vision, psychological critique, and astonishing aesthetics, pushing the boundaries of what cinema could convey. It was the first major step of Lynch's singular journey, yet is still ranked among his best. Even I consider it to be one of, if not my definite favorite from Lynch. Lucid imagination, bold cinematography, intoxicating visuals, hypnotizing sound design, grotesque sights, fluid editing, offbeat interactions, horrific manifestations, and an arresting atmosphere that will transfix and disrupt you while asleep under its power. It's a pure, concentrated nightmare, the kind we've all had, whether awake or asleep. Eraserhead. 3 years after his shocking debut, David Lynch quickly showed his sensitive side with one of the most tearful movies of all time, The Elephant Man. Not his typical oddball form, but the strangeness occurred behind the scenes more than in front. The film was executive produced by Mel Brooks, who decided to remain uncredited since he's typically associated with comedies. His company Brooks Films housed the production, and producer John Sanger discovered the script and gave it to someone even less qualified than Mel Brooks, David Lynch. Surprisingly, there was no hesitation from anyone on board about Lynch directing, even though Brooks hadn't seen Eraserhead until after meeting him. Lynch proved that he was not a one-trick pony for provocative, ballistic films, and had the talent to direct a feature-length Hollywood movie when summoned, still with his own flair, of course. The film is loosely based on the real life of Joseph Merrick, renamed John Merrick for the film, a man born with extreme physical deformities. Merrick, played by John Hurt, was rescued from a cruel sideshow act in a circus, and the film details his time with surgeon Dr. Treves, played by Anthony Hopkins. Throughout this period, Merrick is studied and learns to integrate into society. Yet the film also tracks the perception of Merrick by the occupants of the world around him, particularly Dr. Treves. At first, Treves took a somewhat detached look at Merrick while studying him, yet the more he sees of his turmoil, the more he sees the man inside. The first time Treves is introduced to Merrick is a brilliantly powerful scene, introducing Treves as a genial man despite his initial barriers. The film also establishes how respectful it is to Merrick as a character, treading carefully to avoid exploitation and undermine the whole point of the film. In essence, this is the main conflict of the film and the motif it examines: our sympathy versus our objectification of Merrick. Many are cruel, but others come off as well-meaning visitors despite reducing Merrick to an exhibit. In a lesser Oscar bait film, we might see these liberal figures propped up as moralistic, yet The Elephant Man doesn't condemn these characters either. We can't exactly know where the shallowness ceases and the deeper end of our compassion begins, yet neither does the film, and we explore that throughout the movie. Exploitation masking his empathy, and this affects no one more than Dr. Treves. Treves begins to recognize that by introducing Merrick back into society, he is, in one form or another, showing him off. Not that different from the freak show. On the other hand, the fact that Treves shows remorse hints at a strong conscience. The film is more conventional, yet David Lynch always found opportunities in projects to express things in his own way. The opening in particular is a disturbing nightmare, shot in a low frame rate. There's a beautiful yet insidious dream sequence as well, and some impressionable visuals in the cinematography, editing, and effects. Speaking of effects, The Elephant Man is actually credited as the reason we have a Best Makeup category at the Oscars now, due to the lack of recognition that agitated viewers. The performances from John Hurt and Anthony Hopkins are unsurprisingly incredible. Unlike usual Lynch acting, these actors bring an incredible sense of earthiness to these roles that never erupt into sappiness. Pure emotional performances based solely on humility. The producers almost cast Dustin Hoffman in the role of Merrick, yet decided the film would be more effective with an actor who had less of a celebrity status, and this made it all the better. This film contains the famous line which you have to have heard referenced and parodied oodles of times.
I am not an animal! I am a human being!
A line that hits the nail directly on the head, containing such an impact. It could have been so easy to make this a holier-than-thou melodrama, yet the primary intention of the filmmakers was portraying Merrick with complete earnestness and respect. The filmmaking choices really reflect the dignity of this subject and rank it higher than any other films with similar premises. Again, it's a sincere film reflected in the characters' developing behavior toward Merrick, yet you can taste a grain of salt coming with them. It's not cold or distant, it's tender and warm. Humans are simply doing their best, and sometimes that's all we can do, and that's worth something. The film can serve as the antithesis of Eraserhead, an alienating film about uselessness and decay. The Elephant Man strives to find value in life, even amidst all its despair. The film doesn't exactly inspire, but it's a quest for inspiration and purpose in all life forms. The Elephant Man didn't simply show Lynch's versatility, but his humanity as well, and audiences realized what a heart this guy had. Maybe if you're hesitant on starting down the David Lynch journey, you can start with The Elephant Man, and as Lynch's films become more and more uncanny and cruel, you can think back on David Lynch's soulful ode to sympathy and humanity's struggle for true sincerity in The Elephant Man. Okay, I'll mention this one really quick. If you didn't know that David Lynch directed the Denis Villeneuve Dune movies, that's because he didn't. Denis Villeneuve did. In 1984, David Lynch was given the opportunity to direct the first film adaptation of Frank Herbert's epic science fiction novel, although it wasn't the first attempt. There's a long history detailing the curse of trying to adapt the eponymous lore to the screen, most notably Jodorowsky's Dune, coined as the greatest movie never made, and the 1984 version is the next chapter in that saga. The film faced many production issues, prevalently constant producer interference, yet other setbacks such as budget, schedule, illness, and natural complications prevented Lynch's vision from becoming fulfilled. By the end of production, Lynch's work had been chewed up and spit out numerous times, to the point it was unrecognizable as a Lynch or Dune feature. The film runs at a shorter duration than both Villeneuve films alone, making for congested and messy pacing. Sometimes we have lore unloaded upon us, while other times we struggle to comprehend who's who. I read the novel, and even I wasn't sure what was happening. Lynch does take the opportunity to experiment with psychedelic visuals and some impressive effects for the time. Well, except for the Roblox suits. Because of this, the film does have its admirers and apologists. It's a broad spectrum of people who are Lynch fans, who love it and hate it, or just admire parts about it, and then there are Dune fans, and audiences who fall into neither camp. Once the Villeneuve version was released, I saw a decrease in people defending this film, and perhaps an increase in those hating it. I don't really consider it to be a David Lynch movie, one that characteristically fits within his body of work. Although he did write the screenplay, Lynch himself disowned the film, and even admitted to selling out, via easily settling on compromises and orders to complete the picture. This wasn't a completely soulless product, as Lynch was passionate about telling the story of Dune on the big screen. Again, he wrote the screenplay and was excited to work on a blockbuster. Despite deviating from the conventional formula and even criticizing the scene in many of his films, Lynch loved Hollywood and many of their movies. He loved all kinds of films and jumped at the chance to make something exciting, grandiose, and enjoyable. However, maybe the film's failure was for the best. We can only speculate the direction Lynch's career would have taken if Dune was a success, but the studio system is not quite where Lynch belongs. Lynch's home is on the outskirts of convention, concocting on the fringes of acceptable art, and if Lynch pursued a more mainstream career, we may never have gotten these upcoming classics. In its first screen appearance, the film stars Kyle MacLachlan in the role of Paul Atreides, who would become a collaborator and dear friend of David Lynch for the rest of his life. Also cast is a star-studded lineup of Patrick Stewart, Max von Sydow, Jack Nance, Sean Young, Silva Magnano, Brad Dourif, Dean Stockwell, Jose Ferrer, and Sting. Yes, even Sting. And the music is done by Toto. This film does manage to be spectacularly bizarre, and many enjoy it in an ironic way. Personally though, I don't recommend this. I find very little to redeem about this movie, both in its admittedly commendable victories and in irony. I'm only mentioning it just in case any viewers were curious. If you're a completist, then I guess you'll watch this film anyway. Otherwise, watch it as a comedy, or avoid the worst film Lynch ever made. David Lynch returned to his land of the uncanny and the abrasive with the unforgettable Blue Velvet. A breath of fresh air from his previous flop, and a pitch-dark film that became a classic, despite being an outsider movie. Blue Velvet stars Kyle MacLachlan as Jeffrey Beaumont, and the debut of another Lynch regular, Laura Dern, as Sandy. Also starring is Isabella Rossellini and Dennis Hopper as the notorious Frank Booth, one of cinema's most ravenous villains. Blue Velvet greets us in a quaint suburban neighborhood, almost too quaint and too sanitized. While visiting home, college student Jeffrey discovers a severed ear, a symbolic catalyst that leads him on a dreaded descent involving a lounge singer named Dorothy Valens, her kidnapped family, and her abuser, Frank Booth. The deeper Jeffrey digs, the more terrifying truths he uncovers. Truths about the world and himself he did not anticipate. The film plays out in an apparently standard way. The plot isn't quite as confusing as Lynch's more dream logic films, yet the pervading atmosphere makes everything feel off. The mismatched vibrancy of the colors, juxtaposition with alternating harsh and dim lights, make this experience feel like a nightmare. Lynch is a master magician for harnessing this unique feeling of the uncanny, a twisted Fellini for his ecstasy. David Lynch is so versed in the language of dream logic that he's able to make a fairly routine story feel like waking life. A noir mystery horror film, Jeffrey is obsessed with discovering what's going on. The further his curiosity takes him, the more terror we are exposed to, repelled and allured at the same time. Is Jeffrey investigating out of a sense of justice? Or is he drawn by a morbid calling, the same kind that calls to Frank? This puts our hero and our villain in a parallel relation, almost like Batman and the Joker. Which brings us to the Beast himself. Frank Booth is an animalistic sociopath, and Dennis Hopper is the perfect actor to portray Frank. Leaning into the hammy yet enforced Lynch acting, Hopper is madly expressive and terrifying, a volatile character who will beat you to a bloody pulp, not because he's snapped, but because it's in his nature. Frank is pure evil, or rather, pure instinct. Infantile in the way he gives in to his wants, and the way he cries during music. A small, genius touch, hinting at a slight morsel of humanity within this monster. But overall, Frank is pushed as a force of black nature, an uncompromising beast, and the embodiment emerged from the recesses of all of our most heinous desires. Blue Velvet dissects the image of Americana, the dark side of the white picket fence. Lynch's common theme of duality is at its most overt portrayal here, revealing a sinister underbelly of an environment with such a pristine and innocent aura. The film seems to exist in a crossroads of the 50s and the 80s, and Lynch's love for Hollywood is homaged in an upside-down fashion. Being with Jeffrey embarking as a wannabe gumshoe feels so akin to the noirs of classic Hollywood, yet it gradually transgresses into a horror film, a sick twist in a field of entertainment. Noir is known for its cynicism, and in a sense, Lynch goes to greater extremes in terms of his content. Yet Lynch's portrayal of darkness never devolves into cynicism, as rudely awakening as the film can be. Lynch reveals the darkness not just within this environment, but within Jeffrey as well. When even our hero falls to temptation, Lynch boldly declares the shadow lurking within us all, no matter who, what, or where we are. The film was criticized for reveling in sadomasochism, but after studying Lynch for years, many realized how wrong they were. Lynch wasn't criticizing Jeffrey or America in a misanthropic way. He was merely stating that this shadow exists within us all. Despite how much we remember the profane in this film, we forget that Lynch equally illuminated the righteous. Lynch isn't saying that we're all sinful deep down and should surrender. He's saying that we contain light and darkness, and we have the ability to choose the light. Despite the mistakes he made, Jeffrey ultimately chooses to save a woman and her family, and I believe Lynch corroborates him for that. Lynch plunges us into a cold-blooded, petrifying world, but before he does that, he roots us in the familiarity of characters, inhabiting innocence and vices alike. We attach ourselves onto this vague recognizability, however corny it's portrayed, and are even more jarred when we happen upon this severed ear and the deeds it harks. As if there is another world, an underworld, crawling beneath. A sort of Lovecraftian horror of some greater force coexisting all along, except the monster is us. This was the first collaboration between David Lynch and legendary composer Angelo Badalamenti, a partnership that would last a lifetime. Badalamenti creates these irresistible synth scores. They are haunting, mesmerizing, and beautiful all at once. They encapsulate the darkness hiding in this world, that creature we don't know, lurking, waiting to grab us at our least expected moment. But he also casts a spell over us, sending us down an adventurous dream, and its beauty is just simply intrinsic. Badalamenti's music ranges from sinister and discomforting, but other times the compositions are so beautiful it makes you want to cry. For instance, the track Mysteries of Love, featuring vocalist Julie Cruz. Lynch has a knack for these beautiful songs with female vocalists, whether it be Julie Cruz, Rebecca Del Rio, or anyone else. Despite these disturbing films, it's just beauty. It's pure beauty. When I listen to it, I don't want to give myself to any other song. Lynch was a master of sound, and he knew the importance of music, which is just why Lynch and Badalamenti had such a tight partnership over the decades. True psychological horror, yet in a twist on fantasy stories such as Alice in Wonderland, or of course The Wizard of Oz, which Lynch adoringly references throughout his work, are apt to compare to. It's a dark fantasy taking place in modernity, flipping the magic and whimsy on its head, and turning it inside out. Blue Velvet is an enticing and horrific film, an intoxicating dive into a highly disturbing reality with simplistic, hopeful beauty appearing throughout. Disorientating visuals and a wickedly explosive performance from our antagonist freeze us in our tracks, yet we follow the White Rabbit down the hole anyhow. Succinctly, simultaneously smashing the facade of our psyches and domestic society, Blue Velvet invites you to unlock the secret. You want to turn away, but you can't stop going, can you? When I first saw Wild at Heart, I was not wild about it. I'm still not completely enamored with the film, yet this is a perfect example of the brand of Lynch lunacy. It takes place in a world a step more absurd than Blue Velvet, practically a parody film, semi-intentionally. David Lynch does not work in absolutes. Wild at Heart features two young lovers on the run, as we follow them on their road trip across the states. One is a reckless, Elvis-loving boy with a snakeskin jacket. It's a symbol of his individuality and belief in personal freedom. The other is a naive, love-struck girl looking for fun. Laura Dern returns to play the girl, Lula. And yes, that is Nicolas Cage as Sailor. That's right, Nicolas Cage in a David Lynch movie. If that doesn't allude to the levels of unpredictable insanity this movie will take you to, I don't know what will. Lynch's love for The Wizard of Oz is unleashed, as the film heavily references it in relation to the story. There's a lot of allusions, and it's not very subtle, but this isn't a film that's concerned with subtlety. You can see extensions from Blue Velvet, its ruminations on American culture a major one, but also its tone. It's a film that feels so real and unreal at the same time. Unreal for the absurd actions, yet real not just in its appearance, but the human soul it manages to portray, albeit oblique and stretched. Certain truths about youth, yearning, desire, and of course America. It builds upon American mythology, as figures such as Elvis Presley or Marilyn Monroe have become something of legendary heroes, and The Wizard of Oz being an American myth in its extravagant essence. Our own Odyssey, after all, it's about a girl trying to return home. America obviously isn't old enough to have any kind of ancient legends, yet in the 20th century we built upon that. Movies became our myths, and stars became our heroes. We bestowed that honor upon pop stars and cinematic spectacles. Wild at Heart is a journey into this newly formed foundation, an extrapolation of a living myth. One that seeks glory not in victories, but in escapes, and that intangible guile calling us further and further away. The Wizard of Oz and the Odyssey are about returning home, yet the rebellious spirit of our characters are driving further away from home, toward an unknown destiny. Yet in all this deconstruction and reconstruction, there's also a lot of ridiculously silly occurrences, naturally making you laugh, as you should. Many David Lynch films are meant to be funny in their absurdity, and Wild at Heart is the most explicitly comedic. Even the darker elements come off as chuckle-worthy when sewn into this quilt of queer and quaint. Personally, I've come to appreciate this film more for its integrity, yet it's still not a film I'm crazy about. Initially what bothered me was the middle ground Lynch had settled in, between reality and fantasy. I wish he chose either one or the other, instead of an offbeat drama. Years later, having loved Lynch since first viewing it, I realize this is David Lynch's forte. And while I still don't love it, it's a great emblem of the Lynchian method. All I've really talked about are the unique tone and the themes. I haven't really said much about the character arcs because we don't really connect with them. They're intended to be caricatures of stereotypes, but I think you can portray that while also achieving sympathy with these kids as well. I just wanted something a little more to latch onto. When the whole film comes off as phony and satirical, you don't really take anything in the film seriously. I don't find it as emotional as Lynch's other work, given its silly nature, so again, it comes off as an insincere parody with nothing to attach ourselves onto. The film won the Palme d'Or at Cannes Film Festival, before many had even seen it, which instantly ignited boos and protests. Some suspected it was an apology from the board for not selecting Blue Velvet years earlier, which I hope isn't the case. So as much as this film wasn't well received at first, it has been reevaluated. Again, this outlandish parody is right up Lynch's alley, mixed with a flurry of elements. This might not always make the most cohesive or emotional story, but it is a sight to behold. It was a precursor for what Lynch was to bring with Twin Peaks, although a little more extreme. This is probably why half the cast shows up in this film, to be prepared for the roller coaster they were signing up for. Also starring is Harry Dean Stanton, Diane Ladd, and Willem Dafoe in a show-stealing role as Bobby Peru. Lynch stated that the film was about finding love in hell. He was just throwing ideas out there. The light ones, the dark ones, the humorous, the serious. I think this is what detracted people from the film. Lynch throwing out contrasting ideas, directing a cacophony of whatever sticks. It seems like there's no main objective. However, there's also no main objective within our protagonists. And besides, Lynch often operates in this way as well. He lets his imagination run wild, and he doesn't see the world in a black and white way. Rather a yin and yang of a spectrum of emotions and tones, all existing within our complex perceptions. There's a sense of naivete to Lynch's sentimentality, yet it's so sincere you can't help loving it. It's such an odd addition inside an otherwise bizarre and callous story that it's concurrently misfitting and charming, like finding out a psychopath has a soul. Lynch films are very intuitive, so there's a strong subjectivity in your first viewing. Therefore, you're either going to gravitate toward it, or the film will repel you. I still consider Wild at Heart to be on the lower end of Lynch's filmography, yet I can't deny the Lynch spirit, furiously karate-kicking away on the side of the road. Like other Lynch films, it's a visceral experience, and it will either dazzle you or desert you. You'll have to see for yourself if David Lynch's hilariously strange excursion into the American mindset is right for you. David Lynch's darkest film. As bold as a statement as that is, I believe it. While Lynch's duality previously contrasted the good and the evil, Lost Highway portrays a malicious reality with a wishful fantasy, harboring just as much darkness despite appearances. Here's where David Lynch plots become more confounding and frivolous to explain. Ostensibly, we follow an industrial saxophone player who commits a grisly murder. Even he seems to be surprised and shocked by his actions. Following this is a series of motions dipping in and out of parallel realities, but the structure basically changes completely. We dive into a completely alternate plotline, new characters, new story, new setting, at least it appears unrelated at first. But deep down, we know that can't be the case. Is this some form of extreme mental escape for our incarcerated protagonist, or some kind of manifestation representing a part of him in his past? Yearning for a better world, a better story, a romanticized one from the movies, yet one that makes him feel powerful and fulfilled. The way this film is lit is so alienating. Black is the loudest color here, as corners of barren rooms are empty voids. A dark film in a very literal sense, some shots are more shadow than light. This house that Bill Pullman and Patricia Arquette live in feature empty walls, no pictures or anything. Not only that, but the colors are ugly and dim. It's a house that nobody would have, especially sophisticated people like these. Therefore, it evokes the trademark uncanny otherworldliness, showing neither of these dimensions take place in a familiar reality. I can only show rather than explain Lynch's unique lighting approach, but that's Lynch in a nutshell. Occasionally, the camera will drift and stumble throughout empty rooms, creating a ghostly feeling. The angles, the colors, the contours, all bake together to create an insidious aura of noir, horror, and dark experimentation. Lynch continues to explore the image of Americana and dormant darkness awakening within, while adding commentary on the perverted desires of men. With the success of Twin Peaks, viewers have become acquainted with Lynch's obsession with American culture, and Lost Highway was inspired by a recent event that shocked the cultural landscape, the O.J. Simpson trial. This inspired Lynch to tap into the mind of a killer and man whose weakness was woman. Yet even in exploring the heinous nature of a murderer, Lynch still finds complexity and nuance. It's the carnal instincts within every one of us that send chills down our spines, just as much as any viewer or victim. We, the audience, are not all that surprised by this man committing a murder, but he is. There's this silent, malignant force built up within him that we can sense. Something about his demeanor evokes a kind of sociopathic danger, yet simultaneously, is it possible he loves this woman? Or does he see her as an object? The film savagely explores the sick desires of men, which can come off as reprehensibly provocative, but the message becomes so much more visceral when exposed directly to this content. Lynch is not trying to be ostentatious, he is merely portraying his vision the way he sees it. It's a world of porn, crime, and violence, because those are the deep-seated patriarchal desires resting within us. Or, us men. These are those feelings, those failures, those intuitions unleashed. And it is disturbing, offensive, and unacceptable, but overall must be depicted in all their ugliness and truth. Lost Highway features a distinct soundtrack of industrial metal. 9 Inch Nails, Rammstein, Marilyn Manson, who makes a brief appearance in the film. Some of the edgiest music coming out of the 90s, and was a perfect reflection for the gothic counterculture Lynch was trying to capture in this film. Smashing Pumpkins and David Bowie even contributed. A provocative film both in content and form, this seedy psychological soap opera won't leave your mind for a while, trying to make sense of the dredges of insanity you just witnessed. The tormenting Lost Highway. What an immense drop-off, and I mean that in terms of genre, not quality, because I love this film. The Straight Story is commonly known as the most un-Lynch Lynch film in his oeuvre. A family movie produced by Disney, the film is based on the true story of Alvin Straight, a man who treks across states in a lawnmower in order to see his estranged dying brother one last time. The Straight Story is not vulgar, nor is it complex and labyrinthian, instead relying heavily on simplicity to rein its emotions. Despite the deviations from his tropes, viewers found something that was prevalent in Lynch's films and soul. As I've mentioned already, Lynch had a great fondness for humanity and America, and The Straight Story is perhaps his only film that really concentrates primarily on this overshadowed aspect of his work. Lynch himself actually referred to The Straight Story as his most experimental film. After all, this is still an unconventional film, lacking rising action or proper character development. Some of us are much sicker in our seeking of art, and would quickly settle over a provocative Lost Highway rather than a genial observational look at mundanity. Through that angle, Lynch is still experimenting, still growing, still challenging himself and the viewers. He's asking us to take a deeper look at such a meandering movie and find value in it. It is some breed of an unusual adventure, not a normal trip most of us would take, yet nothing is dramatized, and everything feels like it plays out in a natural way, the way it may have happened in real life. I'm not exaggerating when I say the film is basically just that. A man traveling from Iowa to Wisconsin in a lawnmower. You could section off episodes that Straight encounters throughout, yet it's not a film in which scenes unravel or build on top of another. It's not a tightly woven script of cause and effect, but rather moments of spending time on the road and getting to know this character. There may be some Lynch oddities lightly present, such as the woman who keeps running over deer, or even the concept, for that matter, of riding a lawnmower across country. Yet it's not portrayed as quirky. It's portrayed as persistent and determined. Even in the film's odd moments, you can chuckle, but it doesn't take away from the admiration of life and the venerated strength of the everyman. He meets some people, he makes friends, they share stories, they help each other, and then he goes off toward another rural adventure. A modern myth, an American hero of sorts. He's not exceptional, yet there are exceptional things about him. I love stories in which life gently unfolds in its most natural ways, and every interaction seems so real and so earnest that you unknowingly and easily become attached to Alvin Straight's story. The film is piloted by Richard Farnsworth's calmly moving performance, his last one before his death. During filming, Farnsworth was dying of cancer, and you can see that pain translate through his performance. It's not explicit, but it is there, and the intuitive nature of the film compels the audience to pick up on it. Farnsworth's best moment comes in one rare dramatic monologue of rumination and regret. It's the only overt window into Alvin Straight's soul, clearly illuminating the breed of pain he must have been wrestling with his whole life. It's a story about age, and we don't learn a lot about Straight's past, but we see him as he is now, and come to our own conclusions based on his present state. We can read the history and stories within Straight's demeanor, but this film is only concerned with his present situation and likeness, much like Paris, Texas, and I'm not making that comparison just because Harry Dean Stanton is in this. Speaking of which, everything culminates in the ending. Not in a big way, of course, but you breathe a sigh of relief. Once again, it's the tool of simplicity, naturalism. Hardly any words are spoken, but you know a shift in their relationship has occurred. Rather than a grand reunion, the film lets you use your imagination to conclude the obvious. It's a beautiful, eye-watering ending, and only has to imply. The film doesn't aim for high drama like The Elephant Man, instead entrusting the audience to recognize the catharsis within Alvin Straight and be enraptured by his sojourn. The Straight Story is a charming film, although not without its weight of sadness, solely accomplished by effortlessly portraying real life. A man who doesn't save the world from a villain or a girl from a burning building, but demonstrates the essence of the human ambition in a unique fashion. For that, I believe it's slightly more effective in its execution of humble sincerity, and this is why it's one of my personal favorite Lynch films. Don't sleep on The Straight Story. It's an essential Lynch film and is key to understanding him. It will help you gain a greater appreciation for David Lynch, life, and the strife of the human spirit. In 2001, the world was introduced to Mulholland Drive. David Lynch had been forming and perfecting his style for nearly 25 years, and it all culminated in his greatest cinematic achievement. At first glance, Mulholland Drive is nothing out of the ordinary. Well, okay, it's very unordinary, but it overall checks all the boxes of a David Lynch film. Mulholland Drive is a classic, mind-bending maze of a nightmare from Lynch, yet it's the one that gathered every aspect he was known for and harnessed his strengths the best. You can see the morbid mystery of Blue Velvet, the dual realities of Lost Highway, the pulpy drama of Twin Peaks, dreamlike atmosphere, American culture, the uncanny and disturbing balance of the real and the surreal. It's all there, and for some reason, it's the one that worked. It's the most memorable and successful at it. It's hard to pinpoint exactly why this is Lynch's masterpiece. It's just the one that feels right, that feels like witnessing a cinematic milestone. To put it in a very simplified summary, Mulholland Drive is a mystery, but it becomes a mystery in which you, the viewer, is the detective. The original script was a pilot for a TV series Lynch wanted to create, but when it wasn't picked up, he decided to turn it into a film. The central plot point appears to follow two women named Betty and Rita. Betty is an up-and-coming actress trying to make it in Hollywood, while Rita has just escaped an attempt on her life and is suffering from amnesia. Together, the two of them try to unravel Rita's past, stumbling down a dank, dark corridor that reveals a heinous and horrifying truth about both of them. But as you may expect by now, what's the point of summarizing plots in Lynch films? The movie is interspersed with tons of other characters, arcs, or even self-contained scenes all throughout, one of them involving a director struggling between the medium of art and fame. The film heavily explores the inner workings of its setting, Los Angeles. The dreams, the opportunities, the fame, the plasticity, the facetiousness, the jealousy, the corruption. A city built on artifice, therefore is a perfect location for Lynch in his half-earnestness. It seems appropriate that a film about LA would blur the line between what is truth and what is fiction. A sect of America that Lynch examines in all its ugliness, yet never resorts to cynicism. Lynch expressed his love for LA and Hollywood, but was keen enough to recognize that it, like everything else, had a dark side. Even though you can sense this is hiding something under the surface, you're still invested in these characters' investigation, strangely. And when a twist in the structure finally arrives, you're stunned at having the rug pulled out from under you. Much like Twin Peaks, despite its off-kilter nature, was able to draw you into its disparate lives. The film frequently fools the viewer into believing a particular scene is real, whatever that even means to you. Even if we know it's not real, sometimes we still become engrossed in what we're watching, as if the scenario is orchestrated, but the emotions, the movements, the intentions, or the subconscious are very real. It's not one story, it's many stories, a shared experience as well as isolated anecdotes, detaching from a singular egocentric perspective and encompassing many lives who are affected by this storm of insanity, was probably inspired by Lynch's work on television. It makes the film more complex, yet paradoxically rounds it out, and even makes it clearer. Perhaps what makes Mulholland Drive special is that it strikes the balance of reality and surrealism better than Lynch's previous works. It offers you just enough corridors of content and context, but leaves enough doors closed to draw in the viewer and engage them in the mysterious mist. While it was already an established staple of Lynch's work, his previous films would perhaps stray too much into the dreams or too much into the uncannily realistic. Mulholland Drive is big enough to be cinematic, yet deft enough to intrigue us, compelling us to look deeper into this world. How does it do that? Well, it's tough to explain why. Not everything has a rational explanation, and contains a more subconscious source, much like how a dream operates. My favorite scene in the film is the Club Silencio scene, no questions asked. Our characters lucidly travel here in the middle of the night. Background characters take center stage, performing a show oscillating between beauty, fear, and wonder. A crisp, cold air caresses as vocalist Rebecca Del Rio sings. You're unsure if you're awake or asleep. It feels exactly like you're dreaming, and Lynch is the best filmmaker, maybe even the only filmmaker, who can depict the erratic flow of a dream so vividly, who could tap into dream logic and replicate the disenchanting ecstasy so flawlessly. Every moment is glazed with an inspired idea, No scene is just an obligatory establishing scene. It all serves a purpose, or offers some creative captivation. It's all done with a wonderful and weird creative twist. Lynch is always conjuring up elements or items he can add to a scene to make it more engaging, more layered. It stimulates you and engages you so much deeper in this confounding and tangled enigma as you try to solve this strange case from the comfort of your seat. David Lynch even included a list of 10 hints to assist the viewer in figuring it all out. However, I do still want to stress you shouldn't have to focus too much on deciphering what it means. On a first viewing, try not to spend all your energy on something that many people still have trouble wrapping their head around. If I'm not gonna get it, you're not gonna get it, so relax. As I've said before, just enjoy the experience that Mulholland Drive creates and the spell it casts over you. Lynch encourages us to look deeper into his films, yet he refrains from giving any explanation. Even the common one accepted by most viewers hasn't been confirmed or denied by him. Lynch is an intuitive director. You don't have to think too hard about his films. You just have to sit back and let them affect you. As disturbing as the film can be, it will just feel right. All the images and sounds are mined from our collective subconscious and will find some intangible connection on a profound, beautiful, and elevated level. A dreamlike, beautiful, haunting, erotic mystery. A puzzle film that plays on the tropes and hopes of Hollywood. It's a beautiful place, yet we can't ignore the other side. Mulholland Drive, David Lynch's masterpiece, and one of the greatest films of all time, because it just is. David Lynch's final theatrical production is a surreal epic, his strangest and most unsettling project in his catalog. And I know that's saying something. David Lynch took a plunge down the decrepit rabbit hole, going all out in a baffling, skin-crawling stream of consciousness. A maximalist 3-hour descent of dizzying proportions and unleashed sights. This is by measure his most erratic and wildest film, but overall, his scariest. I'm not easily frightened by horror movies, but Inland Empire is personally one of the creepiest movies I've ever seen. It's not a straightforward horror film, but whenever I'm asked what movie scared me the most, Inland Empire is one of the first installments that come to mind. The frames alone contain some truly deranged energy, some of the most intense I've ever been subjected to. The way David Lynch executes scenes and draws out their most grotesque, inhuman relegations finds its way into your bones and makes you shiver. Instead of film, Lynch shot the movie on digital camcorders, intrinsically adding an analog horror filter to this film. This aesthetic is a constant reminder that you are watching something, a motion picture, a video, an image of make-believe. Set against the backdrop of a production of a major motion picture, Lynch goes against that high value of its subject matter by filming the cheapest way possible. The set design is simple and barren with broad, washed colors, yet the camera quality brings out some synthetic detail. There's a tangible graininess to this presentation, and our nightmare seems so real, even rural. Basic hallways are casted as mazes, corridors transform into burrowing tunnels of our identities. We follow Laura Dern on this dark fantasy adventure, and her traverses all feel like one continuous path. If that weren't enough, the camera is constantly subjecting us to extreme close-ups, as faces are angled, warped, and reaching out of frame. It's a forceful tactic, shoving our nose in the uncomfortable. The film is a mirror tunnel of realities on top of realities, and is constantly challenging the viewer on what is real or unreal. The film often goes back to a previous point in the film, jumping through time, yet urging us to question the authenticity of what we just saw. Yet is the film itself authentic? Much like Mulholland Drive, we technically follow a central protagonist, yet the narrative veers off into other side events or one-off characters. Laura Dern will wander into a room, some people do something weird, and then she moves on. This is why I say it's Lynch's craziest film, because unlike his other works, the narrative backbone anchoring the structure and audience into the flow of this experience is not as sturdy. At least, not as much as his previous works. Some viewers might see this as the film being more random and less cohesive, harder to latch onto than a Blue Velvet, Wild at Heart, or even Mulholland Drive and Eraserhead. Lynch was advancing his style, noticeably becoming more and more distant from conventional constraints of coherent cinema, and embraced the ultimate surreal labyrinth with his final film. This may bother some viewers, but it doesn't bother me. I love this experience. It's a hallucinatory nightmare that violently wakes you up as soon as it lulls you into a trance. Anyway, the plot? Is there one? I should have mentioned this earlier. Look at my non-linear narrative in honor of the film itself. Inland Empire sees the return of Laura Dern, as well as Justin Theroux, Grace Zabriskie, Harry Dean Stanton, Jeremy Irons, and voice cameos by Naomi Watts and Laura Herring. Dern plays a Hollywood actress preparing for her next role, when reality slowly falls apart, and things become difficult to discern, including herself. Her perception and self-perception reveal shocking faces, further haunting her with the bizarre and the truthfulness that lies under her world and under her skin. The film treads similar ground to Mulholland Drive, given its setting and protagonist's occupation. With Inland Empire, Lynch refocuses to the concept of identity rather than the Hollywood system, although that commentary isn't completely absent. Almost in line with Jacques Rivette's preoccupation with performance, not solely in regard to playing, but using performing arts as a metaphor for our own performances in real life. It's an examination on masks and personas, primarily with the ones we're unaware we harbor. The film also addresses the way women are treated in the industry, something that was slightly ahead of its time in regard to the Me Too movement. But femininity was a theme that Lynch covered in many of his films, including Mulholland Drive. As the film progresses, we are shown many different perspectives, sometimes from the same actors playing different characters, and we start to question whose story is this? The recurring theme of multiplicity, of course, is up for grabs in the people we're seeing. Or maybe it's simply fascinating to see the same event from different viewpoints. Perhaps it's a commentary on narcissism and gives individuals who are not famous celebrities the spotlight. Perhaps Lynch is celebrating the power of art and the silver screen, and the hope and beauty it can inspire. Time, fiction, reality, identity, all bleed into and amalgamate into one beast. The dark side of life itself, in which we can't comprehend with our meager thoughts, and don't dare attempt to venture into. Inland Empire is Lynch's most bizarre and disturbing film, his career culminating in a glorious display of repulsion and imagination. A visceral trip through the dungeons of our own minds, an upending of what we thought was true, yet a certain reverence for the human experience and the screens that try to reflect that. We may not be actors, but we all play different roles. Now before we finish, there is a major volume of Lynch's work that I haven't addressed yet, but feel like I definitely should. Some of you keen viewers may have noticed that I only discussed 9 films, while Lynch has 10. That's because the film I skipped over is a part of a much greater franchise. A chapter in an expansive world of American lore. Lynch's Lord of the Rings, if you will. Some consider it to be Lynch's greatest legacy, and him at his most expressive. I am of course talking about the legendary series, Twin Peaks. I've never covered TV shows on this series, but in discussing David Lynch's whole career, I have to make an exception. Twin Peaks initially began as a television series on ABC, co-created with Mark Frost, and I don't think even Lynch could predict where it would go.
Mark Frost and I, did that. And Mark Frost is at least 50% of it. Mm-hmm. And I loved working with Mark, and we had a thing going, complementing one another, and the thing would flow. And so it was a very special experience.
The series is a detective mystery drama, and also a soap opera, and also whatever it wanted to be. Obviously, it would utilize Lynch's trademark dreamy tones and horrific incidents, yet it could also be romantic, tragic, dramatic, beautiful, or even comedic. The series takes place in the titular fictional town of Twin Peaks, a seemingly average American town in the Northwest, full of coziness and corruption coexisting. Another obvious motif of Lynch's fascination with American culture and life. The series had a wide array of characters and arcs, but I haven't even covered the inciting incident yet, when the town is turned upside down after their beloved homecoming queen, Laura Palmer, is found murdered, and Special FBI Agent Dale Cooper comes to Twin Peaks, working with the town's law enforcement in order to solve her mysterious case. This proves to be the biggest challenge in Cooper's career yet, as the case only gets stranger and stranger the further he gets. Agent Cooper is played by Lynch's leading man, Kyle MacLachlan, in the role he was born for. Under any other director, MacLachlan would be criticized for being corny and awkward, but a director like Lynch knows how to utilize him. He's odd in a wholesome and charming way, and his quirks are entertaining and admirable. Cooper is a character who sees the good in everybody. He's the ultimate force of good in the show. Overall an optimist, yet still manages to take his job as a law enforcer seriously. He's a white-collar boy, which makes him a little too pristine in comparison to everybody else, yet the town instantly gravitates toward him. Lynch manages to portray Cooper's demeanor in a celebratory lens, highlighting the positives of the average American hero. Both Lynch and McLaughlin described Cooper as Jeffrey Beaumont from Blue Velvet grown up, a continuation of the character, but Twin Peaks as a whole is a continuation of Blue Velvet's themes, weighing out the yin and the yang, the light and the dark of a stereotypical Americana. As for the remaining cast, Lynch selected numerous actors to fill out the space of the town. Regulars like Jack Nance, Catherine E. Coulson, Piper Laurie, Cheryl Lee, Grace Zabriskie, Miguel Ferrer, and tons of other performers as well, including Lynch himself as FBI Director Gordon Cole. Even David Bowie makes a small appearance, in some bonus footage. The actors range from traditionally dramatic performers to hammy and wooden acting, yet the show is able to conduct both these styles under its unique umbrella of the strange and the serious. For the most part, at least. I do think even for Lynch standards that some of the performances don't land.
You punks owe me 10 grand. Leo needs a new pair of shoes.
Every episode opened with the Coral Log Lady, played by Catherine E. Coulson. Her foreboding words send chills down your spine, preparing you for the lifelong case you're about to embark on. We're introduced to the characters as they lend distinct personalities and roles to the story and environment. Some of them are average and humble, while others are troubled. Some of them are romantic, while others are more earthly. Some are ditzy and comedic, while others are intimidating and suspicious. Some are heroic, some are selfish, cowards, and confused. Vices and virtues swarm the citizens of Twin Peaks alike, just like a real town, yet Lynch never clarifies whether it's good or bad. It's a palette of the highest variety, or in other words, it's just a town. They're oblivious archetypes, but that was intentional. It examines all types of people you'd meet in America, and archetypes can give more room for artists to paint and discover. I can't go any further without mentioning Angelo Badalamenti's gorgeous score for the series. Soporific synths spellbind and seduce. Underlying many of the scenes, it's a perfect soundtrack for the show, tinging on melodrama, but not quite too saccharine. It's a sincere beauty, that's explicit emotions are the draw. The original tracks featuring Julie Cruz's vocals are just as enchanting. Lynch would expand from the town of Twin Peaks later in the franchise, but we'll get to that in a bit. Twin Peaks was a great project for Lynch because he could basically do whatever he wanted, given its vast world and structure. Whatever genre, whatever tone, whatever aesthetic, he set no rules for himself. Much like other Lynch features, it feels barely reminiscent of past genres, but they're diluted to their most basic skeleton and compensated in whatever insane idea emerges from Lynch's head that day. For instance, a noir concept is filled in with the uncanny horror of dissonant dreams, distorted faces, monsters as people, deep-seated psychology, and a hint of hidden beauty. It looks like the detective shows you've seen, but it also looks like the soap operas, and it also looks like something you've never seen before. The mood shifted drastically depending on the scene. It was capturing American life, and simply life itself. Life is sad, disappointing, funny, uplifting, emboldening, yet life is also strange and terrifying. We may not relate to being transported to a dream world of backward speech, but we've all encountered an unknown force of which we do not know how to reckon with. We go through life trying to make sense of it. We all interpret the world in our own way. The world is an insane place, and we struggle to add logic to the illogical. It's unsettling, but it's also beautiful. There's an innate sense of tranquility that comes to Cooper when he becomes in touch with the Lodge, and at peace with the unknown. Despite its more grounded setting, Twin Peaks still features horrific imagery and twisted worlds existing parallel to our own. Twin Peaks encompasses many aspects of life, but overall confirms life is a mystery. It contains so many different perspectives, stories, characters, and so many directions branching off from the same tree. Maximal in its narrative threads, yet simple in its approach. Something about watching Twin Peaks feels so familiar, yet it feels duplicitous as well. In Twin Peaks, life is a dream, or dreams are life. Perhaps to Lynch there is no difference. This is how he saw the world, as strange and wondrous as a dream. Twin Peaks ran for a total of 2 seasons. In one way, it was the black sheep of television, yet it garnered some considerable respect for its ambition. We often credit the golden age of television, such as The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, or The Wire, for evolving past the episodic nature of TV and featuring long-form story arcs, in which the viewers had to watch every previous episode to keep up. Twin Peaks is kind of the predecessor in that, as I've already mentioned, borrowing from what soap operas had been doing. But Twin Peaks was so much more than a soap opera, and for a brief time, audiences tuned in to be mesmerized and intrigued, to see what insights Cooper would entail, or coming one step closer to the shocking truth of Laura Palmer's death. By Season 2, viewers notice a decrease in quality. There are still some good moments, dream sequences, and story threads, but other threads were just stupid. There's no other way to put it. By this time, Lynch and Mark Frost were not as involved in this season as they were the first one, which even caused a rift in Lynch's and McLaughlin's relationship for a while. I think many were disappointed that the show had essentially wrapped up its main mystery, and had moved on toward other miscellaneous subplots. I don't have an issue with the series being done with the Laura Palmer murder. After all, even during its first season, the show revolved around more than just her mysterious death. I do want the show to grow, and I wanted to explore these characters and this town in both uncomfortable and delightful ways. I should feel discomfort, not cringe. I remember being pretty upset with Season 2, but looking back on it, it's not all bad. We still get Cooper being cool, wise, and quirky. We get some highly imaginative lodge segments, and Audrey Horne still being sexy. Twin Peaks ultimately explores America, the good and the bad. Twin Peaks is perhaps the best example of Lynch's polemic vision of good and evil, light and darkness, violence and serenity, optimism and pessimism. Nowhere is this better symbolically summarized than the character-turned-icon, Laura Palmer. Laura was not only popular in school, but beloved by the entire town. She was pretty, peppy, kind, charitable, the perfect American girl, if you will. However, after her death, the detectives discover a double life she was living. A sordid life full of drugs, prostitution, affairs, and hedonistic exploits of the most transgressive degree. It's strange that Laura became somewhat of a symbol for the show, despite the fact, or perhaps reinforced by the fact, that she's dead. In death, she becomes an icon, a concept to reflect upon, and despite Cooper being the defunct protagonist, she's the star of the show. This leads us to the Twin Peaks installment that properly explores Laura in the theatrical movie, Twin Peaks: Fire Walk With Me. Which, by the way, you have to watch the show before watching the movie. Major spoilers. After the cancellation of the series, Lynch decided on filming a Twin Peaks movie, serving as a prequel to the series, centering on Laura's life before her untimely death. The film focuses much more on the dark and bizarre side of Twin Peaks, and is noticeably more explicit. Lynch does not revel in any obscenity in an effort to shame Laura, rather he takes pity and portrays her with sympathy. This double life Laura was living is not purely a pursuit of sin and vice, it's a response to trauma. Laura is a deeply troubled character who has suffered severe and taboo sexual abuse. It's impossible for her to handle the capacity of being the perfect all-American girl. The stress of this persona and her disintegrated home life cannot coexist, therefore collide in a collage of chaos. She must find an outlet, and sadly, she does that the only way a young girl knows how. In this lens, Lynch is unmasking the vile face under the domesticity often presented to their neighbors. What always lurks there, what we either ignore or embrace. It's shocking, but Lynch is not shying away from the real horror that many women perhaps have faced. I believe portraying issues in all their honesty turns around from being disturbing to comforting those with similar past experiences, reminding us that we are not alone. You can find chain-link similarities in all of Lynch's work, and Fire Walk With Me definitely has a lot in common to Blue Velvet, a highly surreal and disturbing nightmare. Audiences' receptions weren't anything near crazy, and the film did okay. However, once the Twin Peaks cult following really took off around the 2010s, the film received a reappraisal, with many even saying it's Lynch's best. I myself thought it was good, but not great when I first viewed it. Looking back on the film now though, I totally understand why this is people's favorite Lynch film. And that comes down to mainly the emotion. Again, the main character of Laura Palmer. I don't even know if I'd say this is Lynch's most emotional film, but I believe it's the one where we feel the most connected to the protagonist. It's full of brutal honesty represented by insane images and hellish visions. But as much as this film is trying to scare you, it's also trying to draw out your empathy. You feel just as sad as you do fearful. Lynch revisits his themes of duality, good versus evil, but here it's all a response from trauma. She's only a young girl, hurting so badly. We wish we could just reach in and save her, and that empathy torments us. It's the root cause of drama. Lynch puts on this labyrinthian decor, this disturbing confusion, but at its heart is the essence of what makes any story connect. That empathy machine, that love for that character, that longing to save her. Lynch knew how to make films. He knew how to make art. He knew how to make movies. He knew how to make things the conventional way and the unconventional way. Lynch's critics over the years have accused him from misogyny and sadomasochism, yet it's funny just how many women actually love Lynch and specifically praise this film. With Fire Walk With Me, Lynch not only got to the heart of abuse, but he deconstructed the facade that many young women feel like they have to build up around them. The dark side of domesticity that eats away at their souls. Again, highlighting the fact that Lynch isn't just trying to provoke us. There's a great love and understanding of humanity within his films. And there's a true tragedy in the plasticity that constructs the Americana we want to see. One of my main issues on a first viewing is that it didn't seem to add much to the Twin Peaks elegy. Looking back on it now, I realize this is kind of a stupid gripe to have with it. Although, like I said, when a lot of people first watched the film, they had similar sentiments. It dramatizes the events from Laura's perspective, yet it doesn't necessarily detail anything we didn't know before. I think this is the disappointment a lot of devoted viewers faced. When expecting a Twin Peaks movie, your mind begins to conjure up all sorts of predictions, especially in the wake of the show's cancellation. You might even be hoping it wraps up a certain cliffhanger. The film didn't have to offer any easy answers or a big finale, but perhaps some were hoping for something a little extra, beyond what we already knew. More characters, more lore. We get just a hint of that, but I don't think it was enough to satisfy. Luckily, we would see these things, because the Twin Peaks saga was not yet finished. Lynch technically has 10 films, yet I've seen plenty of people sometimes only talk about 9, as Fire Walk With Me is too much a part of the Twin Peaks canon, which is why I myself boxed it in this section. It feels a little bit like Twin Peaks, but it feels more like it's pushing the boundaries of that, which not everyone was welcome to at first. But as I already mentioned, Laura Palmer's biography would have a happy ending. Well, not Laura Palmer herself, I mean the film. Well, not the film. That's not happy. That's frighteningly depressing. But the legacy of the film would find a very devoted fan base, among those who already loved Lynch, Twin Peaks, and Laura Palmer herself. Brutally visceral and frightening, yet Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me is never at the expense of Laura Palmer. Everything is done to make us feel more for her. And that's truly what this film is about. The tragic inner turmoil of America and of the Twin Peaks star, Laura Palmer. Bizarre and haunting as usual, but a little too close to home this time, in a good way. As if the devils of hell were trying to only scare your heart in a reverse romance. A diabolical scheme from the Black Lodge, right? You'll scream, you'll cry, you'll fall in love, and you'll break your heart. If you love Twin Peaks, there's no film you will love more than David Lynch's Twin Peaks, Fire Walk With Me.
As I said, this would not be the last time we would return to the town of Twin Peaks, or the unpredictable realm of the Lodge. Fans were worried sick that they would never get a conclusion, especially after that chilling cliffhanger. Luckily, we needed not fret, for we got answers in the special event finale, and viewers only had to wait 25 years.
The Last Project, Lynch's final contribution, Twin Peaks, The Return. It's as if Lynch knew that this was his final filmmaking endeavor, for he goes all out in a cosmic extravaganza and his most ambitious production. All his surviving friends and Lynch mob members return for one last ride. Kyle MacLachlan, of course, reprises his role of Special Agent Dale Cooper and a couple doppelganger roles, along with Naomi Watts, Laura Dern, Harry Dean Stanton, and most of the original cast all reappear. We also get hundreds of new characters and tons of big-name actors all participating with Lynch for the first time. It's poetic to view The Return as this grand swan song, and Lynch does not waste a moment. Well, maybe some moments feel like a waste. Seriously, why do we need to watch this lady leave a room for 5 minutes? If you thought the original series was big, this event is even bigger. Twice as many characters and subplots juggling throughout this madness. The series retains some darkness from Fire Walk With Me, yet balances out a wider array of tones in a better fashion. Premiering on Showtime, Twin Peaks is now TV MA and features Lynch's classic psychological, uncanny horror. but never abandons what Twin Peaks was all about. In fact, the series expands on the heart and soul of Twin Peaks, thematically and narratively. Unlike the original series, Lynch was the sole director, helming every episode of the series, gifting us with a holistic vision. This has led some to even consider Twin Peaks: The Return to be a film, and view it as an 18-hour-long feature. Personally, I don't see the big deal. You call it a TV show or movie, it's amazing either way. I mean, TV shows can be just as good as films, can they not? One of my favorite plot threads revolves around an incapacitated, brain-dead Cooper, in the body of a doppelganger, named Dougie. The Dougie story is originally wholesome, in a way only Lynch could make it. I won't go further into it, not because I don't want to give anything away, but because it's not really going to make sense with words. But just know that it has the oddity of Mulholland Drive with the heart of the straight story. And that's Twin Peaks and David Lynch in a nutshell. It's like David Lynch's Forrest Gump. The most Lynchian thing of all, it goes to some mind-bending experimental places, but never feels unrestrained. There's plenty of slow and quiet moments, allowing the viewer to slow down and take in every detail in contemplation and appreciation. Some of these scenes almost feel like the show is trolling us with how long these sequences can be dragged out. But I still believe there's a sense of sincerity here. Lynch's ideas are kind of funny in how strange they are, and that he actually managed to air this on television. But they come from his unabashed soul and vision. Contrastingly, the series is at its most immersive when Lynch gets to display his powerful knack for visual peculiarities. Lynch's visuals are absolutely astounding here. As if he wasn't good already, he takes the experimentation up a notch, and goes all out in 110% imagination. Using editing and effects like tricks, David Lynch is a magician. Many sequences can only be described as spellbinding. Nowhere is this better represented than Episode 8, Got a Light, which is perhaps the most stupefying episode. Lynch's experimentation consistently astounds in this episode, always surprising us with truly brilliant cinematic tricks. It's mysterious, atmospheric, haunting, but overall amazing. It's funny because these segments have the least to do with the overall story, if you would even consider a story a significant focus of the series. It's strange how the series can divert so much from what we've seen already, yet actually invest us deeper with every episode. This jumble of styles and tones would expectedly alienate, but it does the opposite. David Lynch's The Return is a collection of various ideas and moods, and you want to diffuse it all into one broad, unique epic. So why can't he? You can feel David Lynch's passionate mind racing with excitement, and it's refreshing to know that the final project Lynch worked on, he just went all out. He didn't stop himself, he didn't let up even a tiny bit. Almost every episode ends with a musical performance at the Roadhouse, just because Lynch felt like it. Again, it feels so ambitious, with David Lynch simply having the freedom to do what he wants, and recruiting tons of artists to feature on his show, including Nine Inch Nails, Eddie Vedder, The Chromatics, Sharon Van Etten, Trouble, Moby with Rebecca Del Rio, and of course Julie Cruz. The series doesn't solely take place in Twin Peaks, but jumps back and forth between a variety of American cities. Each location or each subplot could make up its own television series, yet Lynch mashes them all into this conglomerate encapsulation of the real and the unreal, the known and the unknown. It's uncanny. It's just everything. Any kind of experience you could get from disparate entertainment products, whether art house or pedestrian, intense or gentle, they all rear their heads in Twin Peaks: The Return. To those who suffer, to those who do good, to those who do evil, and to those who live life simply and free. To those whose life is challenging and painful, and to those who don't think much at all about life. The painful torment of grief and a loved one's death we hoped we would never have to experience is a great tide of this world. Twin Peaks is somewhat of a Lynchian Walt Whitman, finding beauty in everything, even in the terrifying. Now you see why I had to talk about Twin Peaks in this way. It wasn't simply a show or another step in Lynch's career. It was an overblown phenomenon. It's practically the Star Wars of art house cinema culture. All the lines, the characters, the costumes became icons, constantly appearing on the web in homage or meme form. It grew its own fan base that became obsessed with moments and themes and observations, which was sometimes a little annoying, but other times was admirable and even fun. It was fun to see people geek out over Twin Peaks, talking about what they think would happen or what they think something means, remembering the funniest parts, relaying the most heartbreaking scenes. Twin Peaks was this bizarre parody and homage to television. In its strange cadence, we were naturally unsettled, but it was funny too. Yet even more surprisingly, it got us emotional, which is something nobody can explain. I guess it's because the show itself was made with so much love. Its campiness never sinks into cynicism, rather it finds truth in the strange limbo of a medium. One that unearths the ugliness as well as the beauty. Twin Peaks is, well again, it's everything. It's nail-biting, exciting, unsettling, puzzling, dreamy, fantastical, mundane, observational, heartwarming, funny, mind-bending, awe-inspiring, experimental. None of these things fit together perfectly, but is that not our life experience? Come be a detective and unveil the mysterious truth about Laura Palmer, the Lodge, and the universe itself. If you're looking for the next show to binge watch, it needs to be the influential cultural milestone that was Twin Peaks. Dark, strange, complex, oniric, splendorous. One of my favorite aspects of film is that it can make you feel like you're dreaming, and Lynch understood that better than anyone. His films resemble dreams stream of consciousness, closer than anyone else in the medium has ever attempted. There's plenty of surreal films, but Lynch's work is the only catalog to accurately invoke the experience of dreaming, to remind me what my own dreams are like, or how they play out. There's not a consistent tone, no rhyme or reason. Polemic emotions come and go, leaving you feeling perplexed, but mesmerized. To illuminate a subconscious feeling and share that with everyone. Lynch's films were deeply psychological. They came from the skin-crawling recesses of your subconscious. They got under your skin and messed with your mind, while driving us mad in the process. But being driven mad never felt so tantalizing. I don't consider Lynch films to be so esoteric. I'm entertained to the moon and back when I watch his films. Lynch's inspiration came from within the consciousness of his mind, and that's why he was able to transform ordinary lands into uncanny refractions of our world. Lynch saw life as many things. He loved it, yet he was able to recognize the darkness along with the light. This blur is not only difficult to comprehend for many, but is also a terrifying truth, hence Lynch's dizzying style. Life is mystery. It is strange, it is scary, it is disturbing, violent, harsh, wondrous, beautiful, funny, tender, and endlessly imaginative. An infinite rabbit hole, equally selfish yet sincere. They were a glimpse into our subconscious, partly familiar but partly alien. His films were terrifying, yet they were worlds you didn't want to leave. David Lynch reminded us of the value of dreaming. As for all its terror and confusion, it's a wonderful world of endless possibilities that you never want to end. For it was his own mad dreams that got him to where he is today. His films were absurd, yet contained a trace of recognizability, as if the inhuman was secretly human that we could unearth within ourselves. David Lynch's films were a contradiction in so many ways. They were off-putting, yet drew you in. These characters didn't feel like real people, yet we connected with them anyway. Lynch was not a cynic. He loved LA, America, Hollywood. He loved classic movies and all the schmaltz that came with it. He was simply elevated enough to see everything for what it was, the good and the bad. Perhaps we're disturbed by his films because the bad stands out to us more. We're shocked by these reveals and this perspective that it's hard to accept it. We know these things to be true, but we don't want to enter into it. As you're probably aware, David Lynch passed away very recently on January 16th, 2025. Lynch was a smoker all his life and suffered from emphysema later in his years. He announced that due to his health, it was unlikely he would ever make another film again. His death was a blow to many of his devoted fans and left a hole in the tapestry of cinema whose shape will never be refilled. It's sad to think that we will never see another imaginative, beautiful, hypnotic, frightening, revealing new film ever again. But at least we got what we did with his time spent here on this side of the lodge. At the 2025 Academy Awards, Isabella Rossellini wore a blue velvet dress in honor of Lynch. As family stated after his death, there's a big hole in the world now that he's no longer with us. But as he would say, keep your eye on the donut and not on the hole. A great Lynch quote, encapsulating his strange wisdom and humor. It's astounding to think that a man who made such terrifying films could have such a positive impact on the world. He loved life, he loved people, he loved creation, and he loved being himself. His colleagues poured out numerous tributes. Kyle MacLachlan gave an obituary in the New York Times, a heartbreaking, tearful farewell to his best friend. Fellow Eagle Scout Steven Spielberg said he was one of my heroes, playing one of my heroes, referring to the cameo Lynch made in his film The Fabelmans. If you don't know what that's about, don't look it up, just watch The Fabelmans. Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, Mel Brooks all paid their respects to their contemporary visionary. People in the field of painting and music also came together. Everyone loved Lynch. Everyone was influenced by him and missed him. Filmmakers like Terry Gilliam, Don Hertzfeldt, Satoshi Kon, Gaspar Noé, Darren Aronofsky, David Robert Mitchell, Yorgos Lanthimos, Jonathan Glazer are artists known for making strange but beautiful films. Ari Aster's recent films like Beau is Afraid and Eddington excel in the Lynchian vein, and you could attribute that style as a huge influence on the A24 elevated horror genre as a whole, as many of their films try to emulate that. Films such as Titan or The Substance, Julie Descanuts, Coralie Farja, all examine the dark seedlings lying under the most innocuous parts of our society in a Lynchian manner. Jay Hoberman called Lynch a cross between Frank Capra and Franz Kafka. Mel Brooks described Lynch as Jimmy Stewart from Mars. While depending on who you ask, not everyone would say Lynch was exactly mainstream, yet his effect is undeniable, especially on the landscape of film. You can still find so many references to either Lynch himself or his work, just for how ostentatiously bizarre it could all be. Big-name actors all wanted to work with him. He even guest-starred himself in a couple other projects. Even people who are virtually unfamiliar with Lynch's work, or have not consumed it on a deeper level, Lynch is just such a character that they know who he is. They use the term Lynchian, or at least describe something weird as like a David Lynch movie. He wrote his own chapter in the Book of Cinema, and there's something apocryphal, something special about seeing that chapter come to a close, and being able to examine his life and his work all at once now, in retrospect. Accept the invitation to the bizarre and the beautiful, and explore the wondrous cinema of David Lynch.
The art life is a great life.
Thank you all so much for watching Kinotherapy. Be sure to like, subscribe, thumb the bell. Finger that sucker. Let me know your guys' thoughts on David Lynch and his films and his work and this video. Be on the lookout for more content soon. I'm going to be making the next director video basically immediately. I really want to hamper down and get more videos put out this year. I put out hardly any last year. I'm not just making director videos, I'm making all sorts of other stuff too that I'm very excited to eventually work on and hopefully put out. So once again, thank you all so much for watching. I will see you very soon when I talk about Sergio Leone. So farewell, rest in peace David Lynch, and thank you.